When a judge bought justice. Prologue. I sat down at my desk just before 5 in the morning when the envelope hit the floor. Driven by curiosity, I bent down, picked up the paper, and my eyes froze on the numbers and signature that shouldn't have existed. Judge Thomas "Tommy" Partino, the highly respected figure in Caldwell County, Pennsylvania, the man entrusted with upholding justice for thousands, had received $2 and $8 million from a private corporation to ease the load on certain cases the company was involved in. By easing, they meant delaying, rerouting, or simply ignoring them. Or closing his eyes entirely. The payments were routed through shelf firms, legal intermediaries, and accounts that looked legitimate. But in the documents I held in my hands, was Partino's signature. A contractor labeled a family friend of the judge had earned millions through these schemes. The judge restricted defense attorneys from requesting key evidence, prolonged hearings, or deliberately moved cases to other jurisdictions. This was just the tip of the iceberg. My name is Lauren Evans, a young observer and reporter for the Keystone Observer. I started this investigation because a frustrated attorney sent me an anonymous package with a single message. Don't let these men in robes destroy the system while no one's watching. From that moment on, I stopped sleeping. The research went from paperwork to interviews, from data to human stories, from numbers to lies, and from lies to threats. Because no one tells the truth when they have something to lose. And you should know, the truth costs more than fear. Chapter 1, The First Hint. When I received the package, 2 folders filled with court registry documents, bank transactions, and email printouts, I felt something tighten in my chest. The first thing that caught my eye was an unusually large number of cases being redirected to Judge Partino's office, bypassing random assignment. That alone was a red flag. You see it, don't you? The calm voice of the lawyer came through the phone. This isn't random. I checked public court records, but the data was fragmented, incomplete, as if someone was intentionally obscuring the full picture. So I began compiling statistics. How many cases were dismissed, delayed, or closed without hearing? Patterns emerged. In crimes involving property theft or fraud, where defendants lacked legal resources, the cases dragged on forever. But when the plaintiff was a corporation? The case closed quickly and procedurally wrong. I was shocked to see that defense attorneys who dared challenge jurisdiction or file appeals were either ignored or reprimanded. Judge Partino said nothing. His clerks only communicated with attorneys from the right firms. That was the start. But the true story was still forming. Chapter 2, Voices from the Shadows. The first person who agreed to speak on record was Michael Garcia, a young defense attorney. He just didn't assign a hearing for over a year, Michael said with a nervous tremble. I filed motions, appeals, nothing. My client sat in jail for a year, untried. Michael was scared. He told me he'd received phone calls from unofficial court advisors, warning that this is about order, consequences, and knowing who pays. It sounded like a threat, but also a confirmation of corruption. The second voice was a widow of a coal miner who died in a mine collapse. The mining company had filed its own legal claims to avoid liability. The case dragged on for years. When her lawyer questioned a safety report, issued by an engineer connected to the judge, the hearing was mysteriously cancelled. I just want justice, she cried, gripping her worn handbag. But when money's involved, everything vanishes, my hope, my voice, my pain. The third source was a corporate lawyer, anonymous, but direct. The judge doesn't rule by law. He rules by who paid more. It's not a joke. He stopped pretending. At first, he said he didn't interfere. Then he talked about procedural fairness. Now, he just says nothing. I recorded these voices, wrote their words, hunted down the documents to back their stories. I realized the law had been betrayed. Chapter 3: The Thin Line Between Official and Private. One morning, I visited the courthouse. The towering granite facade, the U.S. flag whipping in the wind, a monument to justice. But inside, long empty corridors, silent hallways. I wanted to see how this machine worked from the inside. I spoke with a court clerk who begged me not to mention her name. "Everything's sealed," she whispered, barely audible. "If a case isn't profitable to the right people, it might just never make it to the docket. Or it gets misfiled." Later, I pulled case records from the court office, but they were missing key information: hearing dates, defense counsel names, rulings. I compared them to copies given to me by Michael, and I saw the discrepancies. Hearing scheduled, but never held. Ruling expected in a week, never delivered. Defendant never received the verdict. That's when I first smelled true fraud. But I knew, a lone lawyer and some paper trails weren't enough. I needed a witness willing to risk everything. Chapter 4: The First Betrayed. A witness came forward sooner than I expected. His name was Roy Bennett, a night guard at a facility owned by a competitor of the corrupt corporation. His side job was monitoring shipments in a storage facility, materials that, according to plaintiffs, were supposed to be safe. One night, Roy overheard a phone conversation between the corporation's attorney and a friend of the judge, a man who received regular safety inspection contracts. They spoke about applying pressure, stalling things, and shutting it down quietly. "I was scared to come forward," Roy said, gripping his coffee cup tightly as we sat in a dimly lit diner. "They said my name could disappear. That no one would protect me if the judge wanted silence. But Roy agreed to speak, if I promised to publish everything with full documentation." He had secretly recorded phone calls. Thankfully, Pennsylvania law allows one-party consent. He gave me a few clips that proved. The corporation's lawyer was speaking with an identifiable intermediary, discussing how everything's going to plan. The cases are disappearing. No hearings. No pushback. We're shutting it all down, and no one's going to dig. As I listened to the recordings, my fingers trembled. This wasn't just corruption, it was betrayal of the people who put their trust in the law. Chapter 5: Threat and Escape. Last night, as I was heading home, my phone rang. No caller ID. I'd learned by now, that could mean anything. Useful or dangerous. "Is this Lauren?" a raspy voice asked. "I'd suggest you stop." I paused. Was it the corporation's lawyer? Someone from the judge's circle? One of those family friends Michael mentioned? "Why?" I asked, trying to sound firm. "I have a right to report the truth." "You do. But do you have a right to safety?" the voice snapped back. "This isn't a warning. It's an offer." I ended the call. My heart pounded so hard it felt like it would crack my ribs. They knew I was close. If they knew about the recordings, the witnesses, the paper trail, someone might already be planning how to stop me. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find my documents shuffled and out of order. The window in the hallway, which I had locked, was open. That night, I didn't sleep. I reviewed state laws. I documented everything. I created backups, encrypted files. Because if I gave up, this story would die. But continuing meant dancing on a razor's edge. Chapter 6: Beneath the Eyes of Justice. I filed an anonymous complaint with the state's Judicial Ethics Board, with evidence attached. Their response was sluggish: bureaucracy, red tape, pending investigations. I waited weeks. Meanwhile, I reached out to reporters from other states who'd investigated similar corruption. One of them offered to help. We'll check the court databases in other counties, see if this goes deeper than just Judge Partino. I had audio recordings. A full timeline of suspicious rulings. Witnesses willing to testify. But officially, nothing had happened. Judge Partino denied everything. No memory, not authorized, cannot confirm. But an official statement is not the same as the truth. And I knew, to take this to court meant risking everything. But there was no other way. Chapter 7, Going Public. I decided to publish the first article. A short version, just the verifiable facts. Statistical anomalies in court assignments, Roy and Michael's testimonies, payment records through shelf firms, and a mention of the threatening phone call. The article landed on the front page of the Keystone Observer. The response was electric. People emailed, shared, commented, protested. Social media exploded. Judge Partino held a press conference. These claims are fabricated. The reporter lacks full context and is spreading lies. But the more he denied, the more people started to come forward. Each day brought new letters, new stories, new proof. One man called me, guilt heavy in his voice. We were all hoping someone would dig this up. I'm scared I'll lose my job, but I can't keep silent anymore. That's when I realized we'd passed the point of no return. Either the story would break wide open, or I would be broken for telling it. Chapter 8, The Whistleblower Vanishes. 3 days after the article was published, Roy Bennett disappeared. He didn't show up for work. His phone went straight to voicemail. His apartment door was locked, and no one had seen him since Tuesday night. I called the local police. They told me he'd left town voluntarily. But Roy had just signed a document to appear as a source in a future story. He had made plans to meet with an attorney. He'd even texted me. I'm in this till the end. I felt sick. Had they threatened him? Paid him off? Or worse? A week later, I received a letter, no return address. Inside was Roy's security badge, and a printed note. You tried. That's enough. Stop before this gets worse. I took the badge straight to my editor. He looked at me, pale. They're closing ranks. You're not just exposing one judge, Lauren. You're challenging a whole system. I knew I couldn't protect Roy anymore. But I could still protect the story. Chapter 9, The Trial of the Truth. More people began speaking out, victims of botched hearings, lawyers pushed out of courtrooms, families who had lost everything in unfair trials. And then, the Judicial Review Board finally announced a public hearing. Judge Partino would be investigated for improper influence in case assignment, unethical financial relationships, obstruction of justice. The courtroom was packed with journalists, protesters, and lawyers. I sat near the front with my recorder. When Roy's name was mentioned, Partino's attorney objected. Irrelevant, he claimed. But then came the real shocker. Another judge, from a neighboring district, testified that Partino had influenced a federal case outcome. I couldn't keep quiet anymore, the judge said. We're meant to serve justice, not sell it. Partino's face didn't move. But his hands clenched, just slightly. That moment, that silence, told me more than any testimony. Chapter 10, Collapse. The trial lasted for 5 weeks. Each day brought new revelations. Corporate donations masked as consulting fees. Fake bids on government contracts awarded to family members. Confidential court information leaked to private firms. On the final day, I got a call from Roy's sister. "He's alive," she whispered. "He was scared. They threatened to destroy him. But he's safe now. He saw your story, and he said thank you." My eyes welled up. I doubted myself every day. But hearing that Roy had survived, that he had hope, reminded me why I started. Later that evening, the board announced its decision. Judge Partino was removed from the bench. Federal charges pending. But that wasn't the end. Chapter 11, After the Fall. Once Partino was indicted, the entire system was shaken. State audits revealed other judges had used similar tricks. Court reforms were announced. Case management systems were revised. And then came the biggest moment. The Department of Justice opened a criminal investigation into systemic judicial corruption in Pennsylvania. I was invited to testify before a Senate subcommittee. I stood there, nervous, with trembling hands. But I remembered Roy. I remembered the widow. I remembered the locked file cabinets, the shredded papers, the voice on the phone. "My name is Lauren Evans," I began. "And I'm here because no one believed this could happen, until we made them see." Epilogue: The Price of Truth. The fallout lasted months. Judge Thomas Partino was sentenced to 17 years in federal prison for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice. His wealth was seized. His bar license was revoked. His name was stripped from every plaque and courtroom he once presided over. But for many, justice still felt incomplete. Roy Bennett never returned to his old life. He moved across the country, changed his name, and started over. We exchanged a few encrypted messages. In one of them, he wrote, "You didn't just save me. You saved part of what I believed was already dead, that telling the truth matters." Michael Garcia continued working as a defense attorney. He started a nonprofit to support public defenders and victims of judicial abuse. He invited me to speak at their first fundraiser. The widow of the coal miner finally received her settlement, 3 years too late. And me? I kept writing. I wrote about environmental fraud, political money laundering, and medical corruption. But nothing ever haunted me like the silence in those early days, when I thought I was the only one who saw it. Sometimes, late at night, I replay Roy's recordings or reread the threatening letters. Not because I'm afraid anymore, but because I want to remember what silence costs, and what courage can change. The courthouse still stands in Caldwell County. The walls are clean, the judges wear their robes, the flags fly as high as ever. But now, the people are watching. Because one voice can start a story. But 1,000 voices? They write the ending. The end. Author's note, Lauren Evans. This story was inspired by real events surrounding judicial corruption cases in the United States, notably, the Kids for Cash scandal in Pennsylvania, 2008, where 2 judges accepted kickbacks from private detention centers for unjustly sentencing juveniles to imprisonment. While the characters and plot here are fictionalized, the systems of power and silence are very real. Journalism doesn't guarantee justice. But it guarantees that injustice doesn't go unseen.